Hi, it's me, and this is the latest episode of Built from Scratch. It is the 21st of September 2020, and last week was pretty much a write-off due to COVID-19. However, I did get one more, not quite day's work done, but I got a few more hours done. So I have one more video to make for last week, and this is it. So it was a bit of a peculiar one for one substantial reason, which is that you might remember if you watched the early videos that I referenced a tax bill that me and my wife had got through earlier in the year, which used up, it was for her job, but it was a massive bill. We had to pay it as a couple essentially, and I'd recently sold an investment property and had to spend an awful lot of that money covering the tax bill, which had quite a significant impact on what I was thinking of doing business wise. But we suspected that we would be in for a tax rebate at some point, because we didn't think we'd simply miscalculated things so badly. And the accountancy firm that her company use had a session with her and her fellow partners last week to explain what would be happening with tax rebates, and it turns out we are in fact getting a rebate of £36,000, which is massive, and it makes a huge difference in terms of the runway that I've now got for having a go at this business. I've spent a little bit of time thinking about, should I now backtrack to what I was thinking at the start of this year, which was more along the lines of buying an online business rather than setting one up from scratch. But the reality is, after we figured we were going to have to spend quite a lot of the money from selling this property on covering the tax bill, we then, we haven't actually done this, but we then mentally allocated some of what was left to covering other things. Specifically, we're extending our house at the moment, most of which is being paid for by further borrowing on our mortgage, but some of which we decided to cover from the leftover cash from this property sale. So because we've kind of planned for what to do with other bits of this money, it would be a considerable rollback to get to the point where I have roughly the same kind of lump sum available that I had at the start of this year. It's a lot of that is only a kind of mental allocation, so it could be done, but it would just involve, we don't exactly want to, is the short story. If I desperately still wanted to buy an online business, I'm sure we would do that, but I'm now a couple of months into doing this. I'm quite enjoying it. I'm hopeful for the future. So in other words, I've got reason to carry on doing Wave to the. So that is the plan. We're going to use that money for basically for me to be able to contribute to family life for a longer amount of time whilst I have a go at getting this company off the ground. So we haven't actually put an amount of time on how long I now have to do this project. It was originally around sort of 6 or 7 months. It's now a lot longer. I'm not going to put an actual limit on that. Hopefully it's going to be long enough that I don't want to count my chickens too early, but it feels like I've now got enough time that I should surely be able to get this to a point where it's at least providing me with a basic income. Sorry, I was looking for a better phrase there. It should surely be providing me with a basic income by the time that lump sum runs out. Fingers crossed. So in light of that, I had a bit of a rethink about what exactly I am doing with the business, because whilst I've certainly got enough money there now to extend this experiment for quite a long time, I've potentially got enough money to extend it and maybe do a couple of other smaller things with the money in the context of the business too. One obvious thing that I'll just address very briefly is the possibility of buying a couple of products to have a go at the retail side of things. I actually mentioned that a couple of weeks ago, simply because we got a small windfall of cash, which, oh God, it's all a bit complicated. We actually then decided we needed to spend that on something else as a family, so that was put aside temporarily, but obviously this amount of money isn't going anywhere, so it might be that I do a small retail experiment sooner rather than later, but that's not decided at the moment. It's at least a few weeks away, so I'll get back to talking about that maybe in the future if I decide to do it. The thing that I have decided to do, definitely, and starting from today, is to actually double down on this media creation side of things. Specifically, I had one problem with the way I was making these built from scratch videos, which is that as I previously mentioned, I was using titles for them, which were only half to do with what I was actually talking about. They were keyword research titles designed to have the potential to attract quite a few views, clicks, whatever. But in choosing titles which have a bit of traffic volume around them, I was sacrificing a direct connection to what I was actually talking about in those videos, which has a downside, potentially a significant downside, which is that definitely in Google, and quite possibly in YouTube, and maybe possibly in some of the other places where some of this media is available. So I'm thinking of the podcast platforms there. There are algorithms which will look at user engagement and potentially downgrade your listing if you have poor engagement metrics. So that would mean in Google, if someone were to click on one of my pages which hosts these videos, podcasts and the written description, and they go there because they see the title and it says how to build up an online business, and then they see this video and realise that whilst it is to do with building up a business, it's not a specific guide on that page of how to build up an online business, they may well decide this isn't the resource that I was looking for, and click away immediately to go and find something else. Google track that kind of behaviour, and if they see too many people doing that, they will actually downgrade you in the rankings. It wouldn't surprise me at all if YouTube had the same kind of technology, especially since they're owned by Google. It doesn't mean everything works identically, but it increases the chances of a similar way of doing things. And possibly even the less well-resourced, smaller companies out there, they might be doing the same kind of thing too. So I didn't love the fact that I was doing that. Also, just from a user experience point of view, it's not just about what affects your rankings, it's about how likely it is that people are going to look at what you're doing in a negative light if you are being a little bit clickbaity. So when I realised I was going to have a bit more time on my hands to do this, it was a fairly clear choice to me that if I was going to carry on doing this, I was going to use that money and that time to do it a little bit better. Therefore, what I've decided to do, like I said, starting from today, is to do a second parallel set of videos, which I'm going to call Built From Scratch Side Pieces. What they are going to be is something directly related to one of the tasks that I've been doing on any day on which I make one. Probably to do with the main task that I've been doing that day, whatever it is. I'm not necessarily going to make them every day, but I am thinking they're going to be quite frequent. It may be that I do them pretty much every day. That will just depend a little bit on what I've been doing and whether or not there's something around it that I feel that I can talk about. And the nature of the video is going to be, compared to the standard built from scratch videos, which are largely supposed to be this narrative of how I build up the business and nothing to do with a kind of in-depth explanatory thing, the side pieces are going to be more of an in-depth guide to how to do something. There's going to be a limit though still, so what they're not going to be is actual step-by-step how-tos. So I now know how to launch a podcast, albeit in fairly amateurish form. I do know how to do it, and if I wanted to, I could sit down and put a document together, talk about it on YouTube, do screen stuff to show you what I'm doing on my computer, all those sorts of things that you see people doing when they're putting quality how-to guides together. However, that kind of thing, if you're going to do it well, is going to take quite a lot of time. Well, either you can be a real expert and then do it in a sort of medium amount of time, or if you're more at my level of expertise, which is low, I kind of just about know what I'm doing, but I certainly don't have loads of contextual knowledge to help me talk about, in this example, how to start a podcast. I would therefore have to put a lot of time into it to check everything that I was saying and or writing. So I'm still not going to be doing that. I'm going to try and find a middle ground where I talk about the thing that I've been doing, which in some cases will be something that I do have standing expertise in, or in some cases it will be something I've been learning over the last few days or weeks, and therefore just have a middling level of knowledge on. But I'm going to try and find questions that people are asking that I am able to answer in a fairly straightforward way without having to do further research. And I'm going to look for questions which lend themselves to this kind of explanation, i.e. just sitting in front of the camera or on the podcast microphone, talking through it in a way that will provide a quality explanation or answer without needing any kind of graphical support. Off the top of my head, bearing in mind I haven't done any research for one of these at all so far, I'm just trying to think off the top of my head, what would that mean? I mean, this is too kind of stupid and basic, but it's going to be all the questions that are the W questions, what, why, where, etc., rather than how to. So what is a podcast? I mean, that's probably too generic to be worth talking about, but that is the kind of thing that I might go into. So the benefit of doing that, not only is it that it's more content, it's potentially more traffic to the site and more things to talk to other people about to try and attract links or attention. It's also something where I will be able to apply keyword research titles which have a little bit of volume, or actually in some cases probably quite a lot of potential volume attached to them, and they will directly relate to what I then produce. So hopefully the search engines will like it. The only other thing worth mentioning about that is for the written content, auto transcription might not be good enough for that. Because again, if I'm going to get good engagement metrics, the written content is going to have to be quite well written, so I may have to actually manually edit them, which, bearing in mind how little of the core content of the website I've currently done, is quite I don't really like the prospect of that. But in the context of this significantly greater amount of money I now have and the significantly longer runway, I do think it might be worth that greater investment of time. So that's the new plan, and that's why it's the new plan. The only other thing to mention it's kind of obvious, it goes hand in hand with that, is that the built from scratch titles will now just be natural language titles. So in other words, not researched, just brief descriptions of what I've been doing in that episode. So what I therefore did on my last working day, which I think was Thursday, in case you're wondering, we did actually get a result back for the COVID-19 test on Saturday, having done the test on Wednesday. It was negative. It was never going to be anything other than negative. It was just a bureaucratic thing, having to get the actual result. On Thursday, the only other thing I therefore actually did was to retrofit the existing 12 built from scratch videos with new natural language titles, which took a while since they were all published. I had to do it multiple times and for each one, but that was done, and that was it. So that's it for today's episode. I am now going to make the first ever built from scratch side piece, and we'll see how that goes.